very sick. Even a very temporary interruption in their ventilation could be traumatic for them. So we started ventilating the babies by hand in complete darkness.
Anything that was keeping the babies warm was not functioning. Anything that was keeping the babies alive with the ventilation was not functioning, and we had to take on that responsibility.
We were all ventilating each baby by hand, but at the same time, we would, with another hand, use our pen light to check the baby's color. So when my pen light went out, I ended up having to put my hand on the baby's back so that I could feel how much of a breath I was giving with my other hand on the ventilating device.
If they get too cold, the babies can also die from just being cold. And so we had to round up some heel warmers and put them against the babies so that they would stay warm.
We were placing the warm packs around them and covering them in more and more blankets, up to the point where you could just barely see their little faces through the blankets.
We were continuing to do the basic requirements that the infants needed: warmth, oxygen, and nutrition, but how long could we sustain it? And as the morning hours came, I knew that we needed to evacuate.
Though Allison's torrential rains continued to barrage the city, baby Zachary's parents were still unaware of the dire situation at the hospital, and it would be hours before they would get to him. The remainder of our story still ahead. And a family's evacuation from their flooded neighborhood nearly cost them their lives. Their amazing story coming up next.
On Saturday morning, we woke up, and before we did anything else, we called the hospital to see how Zachary was doing. And that day was odd because we called the hospital and the lines were busy.
Some people brought their cell phones that night, and that's the only way we could communicate.
Well, we turned on the news on Saturday morning, and we immediately realized, because of all the stations covering, the fact that there had been a tremendous flood in Houston overnight. We were caught totally by surprise.
The first thing they said was the hospitals don't have power. Don't try to go to the hospitals because you're not going to be able to go in.
We panicked because we knew Zachary depended upon power to live.
We just said, we'll walk, and if we get water, we swim, or we'll get there somehow.
By Saturday morning, they were able to navigate through side streets and finally arrive at Herman.
I was worried, but I was very calm because I thought that the hospital had double backup emergency power for the intensive care units.
Larry and Jamile climbed up a pitch-black stairwell and found their way onto the 7th floor, where their baby was kept.
Well, we had to go through 6 beds until we get to Zachary, and that's, it was very dark, and that's when I realized that they didn't have double backup. When we got to the bedside, I asked, how is he doing? And the nurse said, he's getting a little cold. And I knew that if I could do anything, was to keep him warm.
Jamile opened her blouse, lifted little Zachary up, and put him on her chest, skin to skin, where her body heat warmed him.
With Jamile helping to keep warm, I wanted to try to do something to help. And when I asked if I could help to hand ventilate Zachary.
I knew he was going to make it. And he was going to make it because we were together.
We were trying to find places for our infants, but in order to do that, we had to match the hospitals with the acuity and the care needed by those infants. So that, remember, those hospitals, you often send us the sickest babies, and now we were sending back those sick babies to them. So we had to match not only equipment, but personnel and making sure that those babies also got cared for in those hospitals.
Zachary was one of 571 patients safely transported out of Memorial Hermann that day. They were carried down dark flights of stairs and non-functioning escalators. They were carried to other hospitals by ambulance, life flight, or even by Army Black Hawk helicopter. After 37 days of cleanup, the hospital was again ready to care for patients. But for many, it's taken the last year to recover.
Working through that phase was an ordeal that I hope to never go through again, professionally. Personally, it's been a lot of anxiety and trauma from that.
In all, Allison caused the 1 square mile Texas Medical Center $2 billion in damages, including the loss of decades of research, equipment, facilities, and hospital closures. The devastation prompted drastic changes.
The first thing we did was close all of our tunnel systems below grade so the water could not enter the facility. We've built additional flood walls and raised those elevations. Most critical step remaining to do is to relocate all the utility systems above grade. And with all these improvements and what's going to be done in the future, we should be able to prevent any other type of flood, even if it exceeds the 500-year flood.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Zachary.
Now 1 year later, baby Zachary has a lot to celebrate.
He's celebrating his first birthday because of the nurses and doctors at Hermann. So we wanted to go back and be there for that occasion. Every day, Zachary does something that is just precious.
We just couldn't have asked for more. From where we started to where we are today, and we just are the luckiest people alive.
He will never remember, but we will never forget.
Any worse, we go a little bit further and it gets worse.
As the sun rose the morning of June 9th, it was obvious Tropical Storm Allison had devastated Houston.
Yes, we have been trapped in Hunterwood Village since yesterday. I had called 911 and since 3 o'clock yesterday, and they've been busy, I know, and we finally got some help, but it is horrendous. I mean, it's horrible over there.
And we are just getting facts upon facts. Please rescue my son. I'll read a couple of them. Please rescue my son and others at 59 in Little York. There are 83 people trapped at the Gethsemane Missionary Baptist Church located at 8775 Flagship Drive.
Tell me what happened last night. You had a pretty interesting story to tell.
We was traveling along about 1:30 a.m. this morning, and for some reason the traffic came to a halt with all the vehicles stalling in all the lanes, and a big rain came across, and within minutes, the big flood came up. I was in my truck. I said, well, I just waited out until in the morning. I'd take a nap. Water woke me up because it was coming in my sleeper, and I started screaming for help, and other drivers came out, and they helped me out.
Nearly 9,000 people were rescued throughout the disaster. 23 people lost their lives in the raging waters. Many died driving into streets that were already filled with high water and deadly currents.
There was a boat that came out with a woman that was basically blue from the waist down. She had been in water for 3 days at 86 years old.
During the flood, the rescue boats couldn't reach all the folks because they were stranded on high ground. The way the system works here during a flood is all the bayous basically have really no place to drain when they fill the capacity. That's what happened during the Allison flood. This network of streams and bayous are all connected. In neighborhoods, you've got storm sewers and drains that drain into the streams. These streams, in turn, begin to drain into the bayous. And this interconnected network, eventually the bayous start to drain into the Gulf of Mexico. Only Bray's Bayou and White Oak Bayou and even Sims Bayou started to drop off at very slow levels.
Miguel Jimenez will always remember Tropical Storm Allison, although it was an experience he and his family are still trying to forget.
When I saw the water coming to the living room, I said, no, this is gonna be worse. I don't know how bad it's gonna be, but it's bad.
The water kept rising, and when it reached 3 feet, Miguel made a life or death decision.
She started packing some stuff. Then when the water started coming in, we were ready. Just ready, waiting for somebody to come and help us. They both parked in front of the door. So we got on the boat. They took us out to the main street, which is just a few blocks from here. It's a little bit higher, but the water is still deep there. So they dropped us out over there. After that, we didn't know what to do.
Miguel and his neighbors found refuge in a nearby apartment complex, but they knew they had to escape their flooded neighborhood. Huge National Guard trucks helping in the area seemed their best option. The Jimenez family thought they had finally found a way out. They didn't realize that escape could cost them their lives. Plus, the streets of the theater district are usually filled with music, but Allison's wrath quickly turned fun to fear. One musician's heartache and the downtown devastation left behind when we return. The Jimenez family had finally been rescued out of their flooded neighborhood by a National Guard truck, but didn't realize their toughest challenges still lay ahead.
This is your boat.
Yes, ma'am.
How long you been out here today?
I've pulled a 24-hour shift. I got out here about 7:30 yesterday morning. I haven't left yet.
11 News reporter Eileen Faxas asked Bruce to take her and her crew around the flooded neighborhood.
He's the only one who can get me to the other side to see what's actually going on. So I just asked him. He said, sure, climb aboard, and we did.
It wasn't long before the boat came upon a scene that looked like it came right out of a movie.
I want babies in this boat! I want babies in this boat now!
First thing I see from the front is I see the driver cranking, trying to get the truck to keep going. He's up to here in water. We go around the back, and Bruce starts yelling, everybody on the boat, everybody on the boat. So people start climbing on the boat, and you can see this back is just full of people and children. They start climbing on the boat, and then they start climbing on top of each other. So then I just kick in and start telling them, get to the back of the boat, get to the back, go back, go back, go back.
There was a ditch, and the front tire got caught, and the current took it, and then the hood got submerged in the water. So my main objective was not to let the engine cut off, get swerved off, so I just kept putting reverse and drive till the hood was back up above water.
The ladies started screaming, they got scared. I mean, it was very scary because we got the tarp on top of the truck, so we couldn't see anything. The only thing that we saw is the back of the truck. So I got outside the truck, I started waving, try to get some help.
I think every journalist has that favorite story, that favorite memory. For me, I've always taken the most pride in the stories where I've been able to help people. And how do you help anyone any more than saving their life? When somebody's drowning and you reach out a hand, is there anything better than that? I will never forget that day, ever.
Thankful to be alive, Miguel and his family returned to their flooded home and faced an expensive reality, even with FEMA's help.
We got some relief there. We say, when we saw the money, I mean, we say it's gonna be, that's a lot of money, but when you start fixing the houses, you realize that it's not enough.
Miguel rebuilt his house himself, piece by piece, but there is still work to be done. And though he still worries when it rains, he's not afraid.
It's our house, it's our city, it's our community. We're here, we're ready for another one.
My daughter's picture from a wedding 2 weeks ago. The chair in the ceiling. My family.
Do you know anything about your property? No, I don't. I know everything was underwater. My car, the apartment, everything is gone.
Once the floodwaters began to drain and the shock wore off, many Houstonians realized that their homes, possessions, and vehicles had become nothing more than trash to be hauled away. Allison flooded more than 70,000 homes and damaged 95,000 vehicles. In all, Allison caused over $5 billion in damages, over $1 billion alone to local businesses.
And hats off to all the Houston area residents who have opened their hearts and wallets for flood victims.
And I went to wash, like, all my clothes, and somebody stole all of mine from the washateria off an airline. Somebody took everything.
Wow.
I have no shoes, no clothes to get to work.
Here we go. Here's some clothes right here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll carry it up there for you.
Words cannot describe what we all were feeling there.
After the flood, Houstonians pulled together to help. KHOU and the Houston Chronicle teamed up to form the Spirit of Texas Flood Relief Drive and raised more than $8 million for the American Red Cross. Reconstruction began almost immediately on many damaged homes in Houston, thanks to the Federal Emergency Management Agency. FEMA helped 1,400 families with more than $90 million in initial home buyouts. In all, FEMA gave victims over $1 billion.
We were right here at home, and it's been very helpful to us, and we appreciate it.
Countless businesses, churches, and neighbors also donated supplies, money, and help, allowing flood victims the opportunity to clear out the bad memories of Allison and start rebuilding their lives.
And I appreciate it. God loves everybody. You see that He's blessed all of us, and we're all you through this. We're great Houstonians.
Red Pastorek has been a performer with the Houston Symphony for 38 years. Playing the double bass in a major symphony orchestra is a dream that's consumed his whole life. His 200-year-old instrument became an extension of himself. That all changed June 9th.
We heard helicopters flying all over the place, and I just assumed right away that there's a major flood. And turned on the television, and all the reports started coming in. And I was telling Chris, boy, I'm sure glad the base is downtown where it's safe.
What Red and his wife didn't know was that his bass and many other symphony instruments were under 40 feet of water. And the worst part, because of the dangerous air quality, no one could get to them.
We snuck down there in the middle of the night. The building was closed. We weren't supposed to be in there. Got down there and knocked down a door to get in, and busted open the lockers, and the pieces were just laying on the ground, small pieces, covered with mud, amongst other things. All that can float out of Buffalo Bayou was down there. It was very much like the Titanic.
The symphony lost 3 grand pianos, a harpsichord, another prized bass more than 300 years old, and many other instruments. Downtown flooded when water from White Oak Bayou backed into Buffalo Bayou. Water built up until it caused a retaining wall at Bayou Place to burst. The water filled 3 levels of the parking garage, then traveled through the underground tunnel system into Theater District buildings. The brand new courthouse complex also flooded. It reopened nearly a year later in April.
That was the box office. Back here is the marketing and public affairs department, and one of the things in our area back here was the history, the documentary and photographic history of the symphony.
Water also flooded the Houston Symphony and Society for the Performing Arts offices located under Jones Hall, claiming all the SPA's subscriber lists and thousands of hand-marked musical scores and historical documents dating back to the symphony's founding in 1913. The symphony spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to restore their music.
Big picture, the results are very, very positive because the majority of the musical scores are legible. We can turn the pages, they're not stuck together, we can see the markings. So that's the good news. The we saved it. I mean, it was a worthwhile investment, and we saved the heart of the organization. The challenging part of that news, though, is that we have 880 boxes of music that can't be used as music. The paper is wavy, it's stiff, it's wrinkled in some cases. All due respect, and it smells, and it's very fragile.
We saw my desk had risen and was pushed out into the courtyard through the broken glass. I had to laugh because big men don't cry. We lost all of our furniture, all of our computers, all of our records, documents, and in fact, I had kind of a nice little art collection of things that I had gathered as I travel around the United States. All of that's gone as well.
Today, the SBA offices are almost ready to be moved into, with a few adjustments.
We have a lot of our documents on computer now backed up off-site in a building that's above ground. The city of Houston has been talking about putting in submarine-type doors that connect the tunnels from the garage to Jones Hall. We think that that will certainly help in the case of a flood.
We will have a library that is 1 story above ground in Jones Hall. So the music will be moved from 2 stories underground to 1 story above ground. And the large instruments, the Steinway pianos and the basses, will be moved from 2 stories below ground to 4 stories above ground. So they will be safe.
Well, this is the high water mark where the actual height of the water hit on June 9th.
Across the street in the Alley Theater, Allison's waters filled 2 basement floors. The flood nearly destroyed the 296-seat Newhouse stage, its costume scene and props department, and rehearsal hall.
Well, I sort of realized we were in trouble. You really can't describe the feeling because it was just extraordinary to think of that much water in this theater space. And I think the first thing that went through my mind was, there's a whole nother floor below this that must be completely underwater. I mean, I just started thinking of like the Poseidon Adventure, Titanic, all those sort of films, because it was something out of a Hollywood movie. Everything in this room was completely destroyed. So what you're seeing in this room today was put back in late August. We basically had to recreate the costume shop from a new floor, new lighting. Everything you see here is brand new.
Today, the Alley is home to a newly rebuilt and improved Newhouse stage.
We were able to raise the ceiling and create a sort of more efficient and more effective lighting grid system in here. But in addition, we've also put in the infamous submarine doors or flood doors that they had down in the medical center that we will have in this area here, that had we had this door in place on the night of June 9th, we would not have suffered any or minimal damage from Tropical Storm Allison.
Today, the Buffalo Bayou Partnership is coordinating an effort to prevent downtown from flooding again. One project in the works, digging a side channel where White Oak and Buffalo Bayou meet to divert the water before it causes flooding. Now, Red Pasterek is sounding better than ever, and though he claimed he could never play a modern instrument, he's found beautiful music again in a bass that's only 27 years old. Coming up, with hurricane season upon us again, what can you learn from Allison to protect yourself should there be a next time? That it could have been even worse.
Well, as bad as the rainfalls were with Allison, and we ended up with about 35 or 36 inches of rain just to the northeast of downtown. Through the downtown area, the rainfall amounts for that 5-day event were about 20 inches. The impact could have been twice as bad if the same amount of rainfall that we saw on that Friday night had occurred just even 15 miles further west.
The threat of flooding always exists in our area, and a natural disaster like Allison could happen again. So, it's important to learn from the destruction Allison left behind.
Well, the first thing you're going to learn is anytime you have a tropical storm form right on the coastline, you're not going to give much warning that it is occurring. Second thing that we learn, anytime you have rainfall rates of 4 to 6 inches an hour, and that occurs for a 10-hour period, then some part of the area is going to get flooded. We can't tell you ahead of time where that's going to occur. So we advise you just to stay in your house. You're safer there than to get out on the street and go run around. Now, the water rises, now it's 2 feet deep in your house, and you say, well, I got to get out of here. Don't do that, because the water out in the street's going to be 3 or 4 feet deep. And so if you go out there, you're up to 6 feet or so. So even though it was a traumatic experience to even have to get out of the house and get up on the roof, at least the people survived there.
Another lesson Houstonians learned is that flood insurance is a necessity, no matter where in the floodplain you live. Houston may never be the same city it was before Allison, but once all the healing of property and lives is complete, we will remember her lessons and be prepared for the future.